There is one member of my community who always says, "Sarah, you only preach about two things, hope and Mary." Well, today that is certainly going to be true, as today's session is on Mary and hope, my two favourite things to talk about. So welcome to part 4 of our series on the Verbum Dei spirituality in a time of pandemic. My name is Sarah. I'm a Verbum Dei missionary originally from the UK, but I'm living here now in San Francisco. Today we've celebrated Ascension Sunday. Some parts of the world they celebrated on Thursday, but at least here in San Francisco we celebrate today. And this feast marks an increase in our expectancy and our active waiting for the promise of God, the power from on high, the gift of the Holy Spirit. Our composition of place for our prayer this week is the disciples gathered around Mary, praying, waiting, expressing, or simply silent, as we hear in the first chapter of Acts. It says, when they entered the city, they went to the upper room where they were staying. Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot and Judas, son of James, all these devoted themselves with one accord to prayer, together with some women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. The Spirit has not yet been given. The apostles, some women and some relatives of Jesus are there waiting and praying together as community. And Mary, the mother of Jesus, is present. This is your mother, as we hear in John's Gospel. So as we contemplate this image, perhaps we can imagine the faces of our family members, our community, perhaps people we know or we do not know, people similar to us, different to us. We all gather in the upper room, with Mary waiting the promise of God. What are the people in the upper room holding in their hearts? What questions or concerns are they wanting direction to? What tears are they crying? What pain or what joy are they wanting to share? As someone shared in our Zoom prayer group last night, we are together in the pandemic, but we all have a different journey. Or as I've heard somebody else describe it, we are in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Some of us have lost jobs. Some of us could keep work. Some of us had to keep going to work. Some of us could work from home. Some of us have lost loved ones to the virus. Some of us are struggling with anxiety by being at home. Some of us are finding this time at home has given us space to be creative. The faces that we imagine, that we picture in the upper room, whether they're known or unknown, all have a different story. They all have a different need, a different pain, or a different joy. And so I invite us to imagine that scene in the upper room, with our family, our community, with people that we know, with people we don't know, around Mary. And as we do that, now I'm going to play the song that Julia introduced to us last week. Maria, Mother of an Aching Human Race. So as we begin this time of deepening once again in the place that Mary has in the Verbum Dei community, let us begin with this time of prayer, of meditation, of bringing ourselves to Mary, bringing ourselves into that upper room where that community was gathered. Maria, mother of an aching human race, us your vision and courage, woman of faith. What do you see in the eyes of your children? The war-torn, the starved. What do you see across our cities? Maria, Maria, mother of an aching human race. Give us your vision and courage, woman of faith. We have eyes but not for our brothers, too many ears that don't hear. Open our hearts, for you're our mother. Maria, Maria, mother of an aching human race. Give us your vision and courage, woman of faith. Walk with us as we strive for the freedom that your Son gives to love. Turn our lives to those who need them. Maria, Maria, mother of an aching human race. Give us your vision and courage, woman of faith. Did anything emerge for you in this meditation? What did Mary look like for you? How was she present to the community that was gathered there in your prayer in the upper room? I invite you over this week perhaps to go back to this meditation exercise and see what else surfaces. And you may want to journal about the meditation experience, or paint it, or express it in some way. So over these last 3 weeks, we've been on a journey with Jaime and with Mary in the Verbum Dei, and we've seen how much love Jaime, the founder of the Verbum Dei, had for Mary, and the importance he gave her in the Verbum Dei community. In the statutes of the Verbum Dei that were written by Jaime, he writes, "Mary, Mother of God and of the Church, will always occupy a unique and decisive, indispensable and irreplaceable position in the Verbum Dei." Those 4 words that he uses really underscores just how important Mary is. Unique, decisive, indispensable, irreplaceable. He then, in the same statutes, he then continues to write how Mary is the one who propels and guides the growing rhythm of prayer and all that we do. Mary is not on the sideline. Mary is central to who we are as the Verbum Dei and how we live our charism, how we live who we are. Jaime then writes, "As the Mother of God, Mary is the real womb in which, with Jesus and like him, we are formed and associated fully to the mystery of Christ." So just with these 2 statutes, these 2 writings that we have, these foundational writings in our community, they are fully packed. It's like a meal that's so big and delicious you just don't know where to start. But it's in here we get a sense of who Mary was for Jaime and who she is for the Verbum Dei. I think for Jaime it was impossible to imagine life without Mary. She wasn't someone that he would go to simply find comfort, But Mary is the womb, as we heard in that statute. Mary is the womb where we can grow, where we can be transformed, where we can become more fully alive in Christ. For Jaime, our relationship with God is impossible outside of Mary. Another image that Jaime uses is Mary as the hearth of the community. He writes again in the statutes that the rosary is and should always be, together with the Eucharist, the most fraternal act, familiar, and the hearth of the community. One of the things I loved when I was in Spain during the winter was the heater that they had under the round tables. And I think this can help to kind of have that imagination of Jaime. So we would sit around that table, and they had kind of like these long tablecloths, and it had a skirt, around this tablecloth. And we would place that tablecloth on our laps so that the warmth from the heater would reach all of us. And we would be around that table as community, as friends, talking and sharing and saying how the day went. Or sometimes we would sit around that table and pray the rosary. This, I think, is that image that Jaime had, that we can come close to Mary in this very familiar way and be and she as this hearth, as the warmth, really brings us into family, brings us into unity. And in that same statute, in that same writing, it continues. That's just the first part. It goes on. And Jaime writes, gathering around her like a constant rising church full of the Spirit. It is the moment in which all the common and apostolic problems are resolved in her presence. And I love that first part. Gathering round Mary like a constant rising church full of the Spirit. I think this image is what we can pray with in these days leading up to Pentecost. This church that is rising, this church that is coming to birth, this church that is full of the Spirit as we gather around her in the upper room. It's a dynamic image that's just so full of hope. I don't think this is an idealistic image that Jaime had. I think this is something he experienced deeply in his life. He placed his vocation in Mary's hands when he was a young boy. He placed the community in Mary's hands. Mary is the one who knows how to navigate the circumstances of life and shape us as community into the fullness of Christ. Mary is the one who as well witnesses and experiences the church rising. I remember an experience that Jaime would always share, and it was in 1953. Jaime was just 27 years old. He was a young priest, and he had just finished a month retreat, a month of spiritual exercises with the Jesuits. And he had spent these 30 days of prayer, but he felt nothing. He felt so empty inside. He had this big experience of desolation. And he didn't know what to do. He came to the end of the retreat, and it was a day kind of sharing experiences, and he didn't have any desire to share anything because he had nothing. He felt completely empty. He had this pain within him. And so at the end of that retreat, he went to the sanctuary where Mary was. And he always told how he would just come to the feet of Mary and he just placed himself. But in that moment, it was a very simple yet profound experience of grace. That he just felt that he somehow received all the fruits of that month retreat. That he felt this light within him growing, expanding within his being. After what he thought was just 10 minutes or so, his friend came in to call him to say, hey, come on. He hadn't realised that it had been 3 hours that he had been there in the presence of Mary. And I think it's experiences like that that marked Jaime's life, that marked Jaime's experience of Mary. That was an experience of hope. That was an experience of certainty. That was an experience that he knew that Mary was that womb, was that warmth where he could always come to. That he could place his vocation and the community in Mary's hands. And that we can gather as community, as family, we can gather around Mary in that upper room. I would just like to finish this reflection with one of Jaime's poems on Mary. And as we've probably said many times before, Jaime was a poet. And he really expressed these spiritual experiences through his poetry. I'm going to go through this poem kind of slowly, and this translation, as always, to translate Jaime's poetry or any of his works is very difficult. So this is an attempt of a translation of this poem. And it's called Mary, Cherished Mum, Mary, Dear Mum. And he writes, he expresses, Mary, Cherished Mum, Our Lady of the Verbum Dei, make our lives, like yours, an eternal, faithful yes. I'm going to go verse by verse. This is that first verse. I think this is just such a tender expression of Jaime. It's not mother, which can sometimes be cold, but it's mum or mama. It's this very tender image of mum, and yet at the same time, it's Our Lady. And we can maybe think of other titles, Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Guadalupe, this more formal title that we give to Mary. But Jaime gives this formal title as well, Our Lady of the Verbum Dei. And central to this first verse is the Annunciation. And central to the Verbum Dei is the Annunciation. The moment when Mary says yes to God in freedom, where God's word becomes flesh. This, I think, was Jaime's constant prayer. Make our lives an eternal, faithful yes. The first missionaries always say fidelidad eterna, eternal faithfulness. That we can say yes to God in that same freedom as Mary, so that God's word can become flesh in our lives. This is central to Jaime's understanding. And then he writes, as we've heard already a little bit, we want that you always guard the vocation in your hands, and it requires the greatest care, the treasure without compare. This verse really echoes what we've already heard. Jaime, with all his certainty, placing his vocation into Mary's hands. He knows that he can't do it by himself. And this was always passed on to us as missionaries as well, especially I think at the end of retreats. Place this experience that you've had of God into Mary's hands, no matter how small it is. She will take care of it. She knows how to. And then the poem continues. Mary, Mother of God, you are Mother of the Church, Mother of all people, our Mother, we praise you. Maternal face of God, in this maternal love, all the people of the world are parts of your extensive home. People of every race, of every town and nation, of every colour and language, we are one with your love. And I find this part of the poem, well, all of the poem is so important, but this part, the importance that Jaime had placed in Mary, Mother of God, Mother of the Church, Mother of all people. But I think in this as well, you'll really see that expansiveness of Mary. She's the mother of all people. She goes beyond the borders of the church. And it really reminded me, I don't know if you remember in that first session, when we heard Ellen speaking about Our Lady of Uke, the Mother of God, of the devotion in Mallorca to this Mary. And if you remember that prayer there, it said, Mother of God of Uke, who reign within the heart of the mountain where you feel close to your children's needs, obtain for us the great gift of unity above the differences. And I really think, as Ellen really described to us in the beginning, that what we hear and experience in Jaime had its seeds in that devotional experience that he had to that Marian figure there in Mallorca. And I say this is so important to the Verbum Dei spirituality. This image of Mary as mother of all, of every person, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, and that we can be brought together in unity, that we can be one with your love. And I think, this is a challenge for us. Are these just nice words? Or do we really let these words shape our awareness, shape our imagination, our rituals, our work? And the poem continues, in your maternal, inmost being, you give birth to the new light, forming in all of us the countenance of your Jesus. From Bethlehem to Calvary, from the manger to the cross, we will continue the journey because you will guide us. And I think it's important here just to say that in the original Spanish, Jaime makes a play on words with the Spanish word for giving birth. If you directly translate giving birth from Spanish into English, the word for giving birth is giving light, gives light. And so that gives light, new light, is this play on word in Spanish. But it's this giving birth. Mary gives birth to this new light within us. And that new light is capitalized, this new light that is Jesus in us as well. And Mary is with us in that journey, from Bethlehem to Calvary, from the manger to the cross. Where are we? Where are we individually? Where are we as a community? Where are we as a church on that journey? But we can be certain that Mary is there. As Mary guided Jesus, Mary is with us. And then finally, this last part of the poem. Your embracing gaze opens us to the Trinity, the source from where the authentic community springs forth, which you forge into fraternidad around the Eucharist. And in the beautiful rosary, your universal aroma is given it, so that the face of the Verbum Dei is the face of Mary. And this poem, some of you may have picked out the similarity or the imagery. It has its roots as well in John of the Cross, this Spanish mystic. That river that flows, that springs forth. And yet Jaime sees that as the community coming from the Trinity. And you move on to that second verse, where Jaime writes about this forging into fraternidad. And just to note that you is plural. You is the Trinity, and I also expect Mary's there as well. Jaime always talked about the quartet of love, and the quartet was always the Trinity and Mary. But in Spanish, that you is plural. So which you, the Trinity and Mary, forge into fraternidad. And I left fraternidad in Spanish because I think in the English, fraternity, it kind of conjures up other images that was not in the imagination of the mind of Jaime. For Jaime, this fraternity, this fraternidad, is a community where love is visible. It's a love that is it's a community that is forged in love and by love to become this visible place of brotherly, of sisterly love. Jaime often talked about prayer as the forge of love. So again, that imagery is part of this poem, the forge. And then he turns to Mary. In the beautiful rosary, your universal aroma is given to community. So really just to emphasize again that in Mary, Jaime experienced this universal love, this flavor, this aroma. Again, going back to that image of Our Lady of Uke. So that the face of the Verbum Dei is the face of Mary. And we come all the way back again to the beginning. Make our life this total yes. So there's so much in this poem that I've just touched the surface of this poem, but I invite you in this week to really to pray with this poem, to pray with this image of us as community gathered around Mary. And that community, as I say, being people we know, people we don't know. This upper room which is so expansive that it holds all God's people. It holds all the children. It holds all of humanity. We can come there in hope and in certainty that as we gather around Mary, the church is rising. The church is growing. The church is being forged into fraternidad, into the face, the countenance of Jesus.